to our event today. It is quite a different and unique event for York Marrow, and we're really happy to be able to share this evening with you. Today we have three amazing people sharing really amazing stories, and I'm not going to talk for too much longer because I'd rather pass it on to them. So first up we have Jane Snell, a mother of two and originally from York. She was recently diagnosed with a type of blood cancer and got her second chance at life through a matched donor. And so she's here today to share her story with us. So if we put our hands together and let Jane
About 3 years ago, more or less to the date, I was walking through the lounge and this photograph just stopped me dead in my tracks. And if I'm really honest, it broke my heart because I didn't want there to be a hole in the life of women in my family. I had just been told that I had 2 to 6 years to live. And I was desperately sad. I wanted to stay around. I wanted to see my children grow up. I didn't want them to have a hole where their mum should be. But also, I didn't want to be the cause of their pain and their worry either. So it was a really difficult time. And although I'd been told that I had 2 to 6 years to live, I was told that I had the chance of the cure if I had a bone marrow transplant, providing there was a match for me on the bone marrow register. So I was diagnosed with myelodysplastic syndrome in January 2011. It's a rare blood cancer and it leads to bone marrow failure. For me, it meant that my red blood cells were not produced correctly, so I was quite often anemic and I felt tired. My veins were basically filled with cells that were just not carrying the oxygen around. I was told to go and live 2011 as normal. It's actually really hard to go and live as normal when you know that you are dying. But we did go and live 2011 as normal. We went on 2 family holidays. We went to Cornwall, where we go every year, and this is me with my children. They've actually grown up a little bit. And although I was poorly, I was still managing to do most of the things that I normally did. I was still working full time, and I still managed to get in the sea. It was 9 degrees. It was freezing. We then went to Turkey, which wasn't quite as cold, and that was in the August, and still we were managing to live as normal. We put things in place. I do another talk where I talk about creating a life of balance, and it's through things that I've learned from having gone through this whole last 3 years. And it was by focusing on the good things and the things that we were happy and grateful for and what we were lucky to have. And I used to create my mountain of happiness. And by focusing on all the good things, we didn't focus on my illness, which just became one small thing. But in November 2011, I started to deteriorate, and it became really apparent that I was starting to struggle. Things were just becoming so much more difficult. Tasks at work were just becoming impossible. I was getting home from work, I was falling asleep before I was trying to make tea, and it was just horrendous. So we decided to go to Danesdyke Beach near Flamborough Head, and we went there to see if I could recharge my batteries and if that would sort of give me the boost that I needed. It didn't. We did have a nice afternoon on that beach, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughter. We were still laughing a lot. But when we came to get off the beach, it's like a small incline, and I just couldn't walk up the incline, and in the end, my husband pulled me up the hill while my son pushed me up the hill. And when I got to the top, I thought that my head was going to explode. And I later found out that my brain was being starved of oxygen in order to try and get me to send the oxygen to my muscles to get me up the hill. So when I got home, I wrote the dreaded email to my consultant, and I said that the time had come for some help. I didn't know what that help was going to be. I went to clinic. He immediately got me into clinic that week, and we did lots of tests, and Immediately I was told I needed 3 units of blood. My haemoglobin was at 7.5, so that's why I was struggling quite a bit. So I had 3 units of blood and I had lots of tests done. Those 3 units of blood did amazing things for me. I'd not actually had that much blood inside of me for the whole year. So I'm quite a bubbly, happy, jolly, bouncy person, but when I had my blood, I was like firing on all cylinders. But it was ace because it meant that I could plan the perfect Christmas. Christmas was tough because I was scared that it was going to be my very last Christmas, and I didn't know what the future, the next year was going to bring. And it was really hard because I needed to make sure that my husband as well knew all the traditions that we put in place, well, that I put in place, all the things that happen that I think as a family they just assume happen. I think they think there's some magic fairy, and it's not, it's me. So, you know, I was making sure my husband knew everything he had to do if I wasn't there. So Christmas was scary for me, but as a whole, it was actually a really good Christmas. And then I went back to clinic in January, and the news was like the worst it could have been, because not only did I have myelodysplastic syndrome, but now I had acute myeloid leukemia as well. And this wasn't actually a very good place to be. So my treatment plan changed immediately, and I had to go into hospital with urgency to start my new treatment plan, which was that I would spend 4 weeks in hospital. I'd come home for a couple of weeks, go back in for 4, come home for a couple, and go back in for another 4. So I'll talk you through that. This is my hotel. My hospital room felt like a hotel at times because I spent 13 weeks in isolation there in 2012. But I went in for 4 weeks and received really strong chemotherapy, which sort of, it stopped me making my own blood products, and it also killed my immune system. So I was kept alive with blood and platelet transfusions, but I was also kept in isolation because an infection would have killed me. So I did my first 4 weeks, and then I came home for 2, and then I went back in for another 4 to do it all over again. At the end of that second lot of 4 weeks, tests revealed that my leukemia was in remission. So from being in a really bad place, I was now in actually quite a good place. I didn't have leukemia anymore, and this put me in a strong place to go ahead and have my bone marrow transplant. So on the 29th of June 2012, I went into hospital to start the conditioning treatment for my bone marrow transplant. I had 6 days of intensive chemotherapy. The chemotherapy destroyed my bone marrow totally because we didn't want it to repair itself, because if it had repaired itself, it would have still had MDS, and then the leukemia would have come back as well. And then the day before my transplant, just to make sure that my bone marrow was totally dead and that I was totally frazzled, I had total body radiation. It really was a case of nearly having to kill yourself in order to live, because at this point I was not making any blood products whatsoever. All of my counts on my immune system were totally 0, so I was in a very vulnerable position. On the 6th of July, I had my bone marrow stem cells. They were donated by a 22-year-old young man from Germany. He gave me the greatest gift of all. He gave me my life. My son's here. Actually makes it really a lot more emotional. But he gave me my life, and he's allowed me to see my children grow up. And it was the best gift anybody could have given me. Never cried before. Right, that is my bag of stem cells. That is all it is, just one small bag, but what a bag of miracles. Some people think of bone marrow transplant as like some really intrusive operation, and it isn't. They just went into me through my Hickman line, just like any other blood product does. But they were clever, because they knew to go to my bone marrow. and they started to fix me. And about 3 weeks later, I started producing blood. Now, it isn't my blood. I have changed blood group, so I was O positive, and I'm now A positive. It really is my donor's blood that I have. A recent bone marrow biopsy revealed that my bone marrow is all male, so that's a bit funny. And my immune system is like a child, so I'm about 20 months old at the moment. And I have got a 5-year treatment plan for all my childhood inoculations. So I've just had tetanus, whooping cough, diphtheria and polio. So it sounds really crazy. Just to talk about my son for a little moment, back in 2011 when I was first diagnosed, he sent me a text in the middle of the night and he said, "Mum, I couldn't sleep." So I googled MDS. Now this filled me with horror because I really controlled what they'd been told and I'd kept it quite gentle, and on the internet there's really horrible stories. But he went on to say, "I've been thinking I would like to do something for a charity of your choice. And I've been thinking I'd like to do a skydive. What do you think? Even if you say no, I'm going to do it anyway." So I didn't think no. I actually thought how amazing that he was 15 at the time and that he'd probably just read some pretty horrible stuff and yet he was wanting to do something for others. So we researched it when he came home from school and we discovered he had to be 16. He finally did his skydive 8 days after my transplant in the July. Now we didn't know if my transplant had worked at that point, but yet he was jumping out of an aeroplane at 10,000 feet and he raised just short of £3,000 for those charities. But actually it doesn't stop there, because that was his GCSE year, and as a family we were worried that he wouldn't achieve as we knew he was capable of achieving because of, you know, when you're faced with losing your mum, I'm sure your studies are not necessarily the forefront of your mind. He got 13 GCSEs and I just think, wow. And there he is, jumping out of his plane. So you've heard that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the numerous blood and platelet transfusions that I've had and also for the bone marrow that I received. Giving blood, I know you're not here mostly to hear about donating bone marrow, but donating blood is just as important as well, because if I hadn't been able to have those blood products to keep me alive, then I wouldn't have actually got to the stage where I could have had my bone marrow transplant. And the scary thing of all is that there are only 4% of people in the UK who can give blood, do give blood. And that's really scary, because at some point 25% of us will need a blood transfusion during our lives, but yet we rely on that 4%. And I just think, you know, we need it for all sorts of reasons, and I'm sure every single one of you in this room, if your life depended on it, you would accept that unit of blood. So I'd just like to ask you to consider donating blood as well. There are several ways you can do, well, there is an app that you can download onto your phone and it's called Just Give Blood. And if you put in the postcode of here, it will show you all the places where you can go and donate in the next few weeks with the times and whether you have to book in or not. And usually there's about 10 or so choices. And for a male, every time you donate blood, you are saving 3 people's lives, and a female actually. Every time you donate, you save 3 people's lives. It takes half an hour. And men can donate 4 times a year, and women can donate 3 times a year. So ladies can save 9 lives a year, and men can save 12 lives a year for giving up 2 hours of your time. So I'd just like to ask you to consider that. Bone marrow. I actually now give talks in schools and colleges to 16 to 19-year-olds on behalf of Anthony Nolan and Register and Be a Lifesaver, encouraging young people to donate bone marrow stem cells, because when they're educated and they understand the importance, you're really willing to come forward. It's just that the education is not there in the system. Currently, there are 37,000 people around the world waiting for a match who do not have a match. And of that, 1,600 are in the UK. I can't imagine how that must feel, because I got told I needed a bone marrow transplant, and in the next sentence I got told that I had a donor. But I can't imagine what it must feel like to know that you don't have a donor and you're getting polio. So we just need to get as many people onto that register as we can. There are thousands of different types of tissue types, and we just need to get more people on there to give more people a chance of getting a match. So, just to show you that my dream is coming true, of wanting to see my children grow up, that is me with my family now. So that's at Matt's 18 and Jess's 16, and I think I'm shrinking. But I am getting to see him grow up, and that man in Germany gave me the greatest gift of all. He gave me my life, and he gave me something that he can make again. But I am forever, ever grateful to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Jane.
You're welcome.
I have to try and not cry in between there as well, as I'm sure most people would have felt so in the room. There is actually a blood recruitment event this Friday happening in James College. If you did want to walk in, I'm sure there are walk-in appointments available, but you can also sign up online. We're going to be right opposite them in your space at the Student Centre, recruiting people to the bone marrow register then, and I'll put more details up later. Next up, we have someone who I've actually had the pleasure of studying with for 2 years, until he decided that chemistry just wasn't for him and he wanted to move into management. So David McDowell is our next speaker. He also plays for the York Rugby Union Football Club. And in 2008, he actually lost his daughter because they couldn't find a match for her. And he's going to share that story.